Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's DAF, Bava Kamma DAF Memches. We are holding actually around 15 lines off the top of the Amud, right at the two dots. We begin with a story. Says the Gemara, Hahi Itisa, there was this woman who brought her dough into this fellow's property to bake. He used to have a public oven which he used to lend, to his to people, and she came there to bake her dough. Hahi Itisa, this woman that also came in Lamefa to bake her batter, Bahu Beisa, in this house there. So basically, she went into the yard there where they had the oven, which he would allow people to use. So it was with permission. Okay, Asa Barcha. Suddenly the male goat, the Maribesa of the homeowner, shows up and Achla Lalisha. He had a good meal. He eats up her dough. Chavil, and he got sick from this overeating, umis, and he dies. Who has to pay? Who's responsible? Says the Gemara, Chayva Rava Lashalumi Dmei Barcha. So Rava obligated the Isha, the visitor, to pay for the lost goat. Asks the Gemara, 1 second. What happened to yesterday's halacha? Lema pliga the Rav? Do you mean that Rava is in disagreement with Rav's Shita Dama? Rav told us yesterday, when another person's animal consumes my food and dies as a result, I'm not responsible because he overate. He brought it on himself. It's not my liability. Dama Rav, who has the animal to eat? So why is this different? Amri, so the response is like this. Big difference. How could you compare the two? In the other case that Rav was discussing, he came in without rishus. He just barges in and brings the stuff in. So if I come in like that, I'm not accepting upon it. I'm not committing to watch your animal. So if your animal goes and overeats and dies, I'm not responsible. But over here, in this case, she came in with permission. She had an appointment to use his oven. And therefore, it's different. So the customer, the visitor, is basically, by coming in, by entering with his stuff, he's basically saying, look, I am going to look out for your stuff and make sure that for instance, your animal doesn't come and, get sick by eating my food. Asks the Gemara, 1 second. But why is this different than another case that we know? From a case of Mihaisha Shenichnaso Litchain Chite. So we have a case of, it's a brisa. A woman comes in with her wheat, right? She comes in to grind her wheat. Eitzel Balabais by this person, he has a grinder there, and she's coming shlebrishus without any permission. And what happened? V'chlas and behemtoy shel Balabais, and the animal of the host, of the homeowner, eats her shipment of chitin, potter, and something happens to them as a result. She's potter. But if the animal sort of slips on the chitim and is harmed in that fashion, she has to pay for that. So it's clear that the only reason why she has to pay, it's only because she came in without permission, shows she's fully liable, right? Since he didn't, allow that, so he wasn't gonna, willing to accept any responsibility. Rather, she's responsible. Habar rishos, but let's say she had the green light to come in potter, then she would be potter for any damage that was caused to the homeowner's animal by, let's say, eating her stuff. So why in our case, with the dough, do we say she has to pay? Right? And we tried to explain, well, it's because she came in with rishus, and then in that case, the visitor is assuming responsibility. And here we say, just the opposite, that if it's rishus, right, he came in with permission, then the visitor is not responsible. Says the Gemara, there's a big difference. Amri. So the response was presented like this. Litchoin chitim is the difference between coming in to grind, which, when an Isha does it, it doesn't necessarily, entail uncovering her arms, and doesn't require the homeowner to leave. There's no tznius factor there. So so in that case, it doesn't require the marvasa, the chatzar, the owner of the chatzar, the homeowner, to leave, and to get away, and therefore, valad Rami Terusa, since he can still be around, so it's incumbent upon him to watch his animals. So she's not responsible. So if his animal goes out and eats her chitim and dies or whatever, he's responsible, not her. But avol mefa, but when she's coming to bake, that's a different story that involves more physical involvement, and her arms will be uncovered. Kivon the boya hitsnius, so there's tznius factor there. Rashi says she megalas ro'esel, she uncovers her elbows, right? So there, the owner gets away. Hilkach, the boy hitsnius, marvasa the chatzar mesalkin afshayu. So the owner has to leave. So who's left? Only the visitor. Hilkach alodi da Rami and Terusa. So it's incumbent upon her to look after his animal and protect it. So basically like this. A visitor walks in with dough, with all kinds of goodies that the animals are attracted to, and the animal will get harmed by eating it. So if the visitor came in Shlei B'Rishos, he's fully responsible. But if he came in B'Rishos, it depends. If the homeowner is still meant to be there, then he'll look after his animals. But otherwise, she's responsible. Continues the Gemara. Hichnes Shoyroi L'chatzar Balabayis Amar Rava. Hichnes Shoyroi L'chatzar Balabayis Shlei B'Rishos. Person brings his animal into the chatzar without rishos. V'chavar ba'boyrois shichanam oros, and the visitor's animal had a heyday. He's became a digger, pits and ditches and all kinds of. So what happens to any damages resulting from those ditches? So firstly, the owner of the animal, of course, has to compensate for any damages in the actual, property that his bull dug up, right? That he has to pay for. But who has to pay for anybody tripping into the bur? But the owner of the chatzar is responsible for any damages that happen by animals falling into the bur. Now Rashi points out that although we're going to see it in a minute, although really the Torah says that a bur which was dug by an animal does not obligate the owner of the animal. Here it's different, because here we're speaking that he was mafkir his rishus. Rashi says he basically said, look, you dug up my property, I'm making it hefker, I don't need it anymore. So he's allowing the public to access that area. In effect, what he's doing is bringing the bur to the street. Typically you dig the bur in the street, that's a bur rishus rab. Here he sort of brought the street to the bur. The bur was initially dug on his property, but now he turned it into the street. He turned it into public property. So he's chayiv. He's actually chayiv. And the Gemara elaborates on this. More explains avagav. The Amar we learned ki ishbar. The pasuk describes the bur, one of the arba avis nezikim, as something which was initiated by a person. Ki ishbar, a person dug it, and we learn v'lo yishoyer bur, as opposed to a bur dug by an animal. No liability there. Here it's different. Here it's considered man-made. Hacha here kivan the islay lahaych limluyi. Since he should have filled it before he made it hefker. V'loy kamalya, he failed to do so, and he made it hefker in its dug up state. So he basically turned this bur into a bur b'shus rabim. Kiman dekari dami. It is considered as though he made it. So although physically it was created by the animal, but he actually brought it into the street by making the property hefker. So rather than considering it an animal-made bur, it's a man-made bur. V'amarav. Here's another halacha regarding bringing a bull into the chatzar. Once again, he brings his shor without permission. He harms the owner harms, trips on the animal. Either way, the visitor is chayiv. Ravatz, the Gemara figures that ravatz means he crouched, he sat down on something and demolished it. Potter, visitor is potter. Why? The ravatz potter is because he did it this way. Is potter. My papa, my ravatz doesn't mean that. It means shehir b'tz glolim. He unloaded his animal waste. And he harmed the homeowner's kalim. So the visitor is potter. Why? This is unique because the Havi Glolim Bur. Because as Rashi explains, we're not speaking that the Glolim, caused damage as they were being released. After it landed and was sitting, and then, the homeowner's thing, sort of got harmed and dirtied or whatever. So it's considered a bur. It presents as an obstacle now. We know that a bur is only responsible for an animal that tripped into it, but not for kalim. So any item or object that was damaged due to the glolim sitting on the floor is basically a kli, which is being harmed by a bur. A bur is patur on kalim. Now, that works according to Shmuel. Any obstacle, any hazard is a bur. So these glolim are considered bur. Unless you're mafkarid, it's not a bur, it's considered like your possession, like your property, like your shar. Michael Lemmer, so why is this a bur? Answer is, Amri, the response is, Stam glolim of kurim afkalup. Typically people care less for the animal waste and it's considered hefker. And therefore, so even according to Rav, we considered it a bur because he was mafkarit, and therefore it's patur on kelim. Bama Rav, here comes another halacha. Nichnas l'chatzer. So until now we spoke about bringing your animal without permission. What about the person himself? He walks in without rishus. Nichnas l'chatzer b'abayis l'rishus. He walks in without permission. V'hizik's balabayis, a balabayis was boy, and he, as he's walking, he bumps into the balabayis and causes him damage. Or balabayis huzak boy, balabayis trips on the visitor. The visitor is totally responsible. But izik koi balabayis. Let's say the balabayis, deliberately is izik balabayis, and even it's a chiddush. Even if balabayis deliberately punches the visitor, okay, patur. He's totally patur. Okay, now. Perhaps we're not speaking that he, deliberately tried to be mazakim, but it means to say that, he wasn't being careful. Okay, so he sort of, walked straight into him because he wasn't really looking out for him. That's the point. Okay, so either way, we say the visitor is on the guilty side of things. He came in without permission, so if he caused the balabayis harm or the balabayis tripped on him, he's fully chayiv. And here's a chiddush. Even if Balbayis was mazik his visitor because he didn't realize that he's pat. Amar Papa le'amarim. That's only adalei yada bay. It's only if he wasn't aware that this visitor entered. Aval yada bay. But let's say the owner knew. He says, "Oh, I see on my camera somebody walked in." Then he should have been careful. He should have looked out for him as he's walking around, and he should have not bumped into him and caused him damage. He's zik Balbayis chayiv. My timer, why? Because the visitor can tell the homeowner, I understand, I have no business, doing here. I understand that, you can chase me out, right? And even force me out. And Farshim say that you can actually hit him to get out if he refuses to do so, right? But you can't just be mazik me for no good reason. Okay, so bottom line is, both Rava and Rav Papa make this distinction in a case where a person walks in without permission. So if he was mazik the balabayis, he is chayiv to pay. Even if it was inadvertent, it was by mistake. You have no business, roaming around this person's place. Whereas if the balachotzer was mazik his visitor, he's patur. He's patur, provided it wasn't done deliberately. Okay. So just emphasize, of course, the Balbayis can't just hit the visitor for no good reason. It means to say he wasn't being careful. As he's walking through his chutzner, typically you look out, but he wasn't paying attention, and boom, went straight into him, he's pot. Okay, so that's Rav and Rav Papa. Says the Gemara, V'azlu tamayu. And they're actually consistent, they're following their shittas, their opinions stated elsewhere. Both Rav and Rav Papa. Dama Rav and Rav Papa, they both told us like this. You have two people walking down the street, or in a place where they both have permission to be. Shnei Bershus, Reuven and Shimon are there with permission. Or let's say Reuven and Shimon are walking, through a place in a way that's not responsible, in a careless way. Let's say Rashi says they're running through the street. They have no right to run through the street. So they're sort of both on an equal plane, right? They're both there with permission. They're both doing something careless. So hiziku ze chayav. So if they're mazik each other, they're chayav. Husku ze zevtur. If they tripped on each other, then there's no liability. Why? Taima. That's only because Ishneim b'reshus. Ishneim shle b'reshus. They're both on the same footing. They're both there with reshus or without reshus. So, they're both equally responsible, so to speak. Aval echad b'reshus, echad shle b'reshus. But let's say one has reshus to be there, one doesn't, such as in our case. Here we say the b'reshus patur, shle b'reshus chayav. That the one that is there with reshus is totally patur. Whether he caused them hezek memelo or biyodayim, even outright hezek, provided he wasn't doing it deliberately, but any act of carelessness doesn't matter because you have no business being there. I didn't expect you to be there. Whereas the other fellow who's there shlei b'reshus is fully liable because you have no business being there. That's exactly like Rav and Rav Papa. So the Mishnah spoke about the shor who enters the chutzner without permission, nafal abar, v'Wed May of chayiv, and he falls into the bar and he spoils the fresh water, he has to pay. Amar Rav leishon, that's only true, ela sheyivish b'shas nefila. So once again we run to this question of a shor being chayiv, a bar not being chayiv, for kalim, right? So let's see, if a shor drops into a bar and is mazik, spoils the water, he's chayiv only if it was done during the nefila, as he's falling in, so it's a shor that's being mazik. But let's say this spoilage only occurs later. So let's say the animal died in there and spoiled, and as a result the water eventually was affected by the animal. Potter. Why? My time have a shor bar, because at this point the shor is sort of a passive entity. It's a bar. Umayim kalim, and the water that's being harmed is a kli. It means to say it's an object. Right? We never find that a bar is responsible for kalim. Once again, the same discussion. This is good according to Shmuel. It says the Amar kol takol a baru, any obstacle is a bar, so the shor is labeled as a bar. Elul Rav the Amar the mafkul, labeled according to Rav, is a precondition. You have to make it hefker to be considered a bar. Michael Meimar. So, who said he made it hefker? Why are you considering it a bar? Says we learned as follows. Rava's distinction was a bit different. The only time the animal owner is responsible for the damaged water is if the shor spoiled the water directly. Rashi says the animal was dirty, and that spoiled the water. So it was a direct mice. But suppose it didn't happen that way. Rather, the animal who died in there eventually spoiled, and the odor that exuded from the animal went ahead and spoiled the water. In that case, he's potter. You know why? My time. It's an indirect damage. You're not chayiv for grama. And the Mishnah continues that if he falls into a bar and he kills the father or the son of the homeowner, you have to pay the kaifer. Now we know that kaifer payment is only applied to a shor muad, who habitually does these things, right? But in this case, hatamhu, it's his first time. No, he has a track record. He always falls into the burrs. Askin, and that's the case. Therefore, he pays kaifer. Well, 1 second. If he's always dropping into burrs and killing people, then he should have been killed already. How do you ever get to the point that you have an animal alive that's been doing this over and over again? He should have been killed the first time. Rav Yosef, the chazi yiroik of a nafal. No, he never meant to kill people. He has a inclination to to grass. He sees nice green grass in there, so he's tempted and he's drawn even to a pit, and he has a tendency to fall into pits because of the food inside. So it's not a deliberate act of aggression, and therefore even if he killed over and over in this fashion, he's not chayiv misa. So you have a case where he's still around, even though he's been doing this over and over again. And therefore, when it comes to the kaifer payment, you have to pay because he's a muad. So that's one approach. Okay, so according to Rabbi, he's a muad and he has to pay the kaifer. Shmuel Amar, no. Shmuel says he's talking about a tam. Hasn't done this before. Question was, why kaifer? Kaifer for a tam? Yeah. There's a sheet that holds Shmuel Amar Hamani Rabbi Saglili. The Amar says tam meshalem chatzi kaifer. Just as a muad pays full kaifer, a tam pays 50%. Ula Amar, Ula has a different approach. Once again, we're speaking about a tam, but I'll explain to you why he's paying full kaifer. Listen to this. Ula Amar Rabbi Saglili. First of all, it's going like Rabbi Saglili, that a tam pays kaifer. But typically you pay chatzi kaifer. But here you pay kaifer shalom. The Amar Rabbi Tarfin. We're going in accordance with Shit's Rabbi Tarfin. The Amar says, Keren Chatzar Nizik. If an animal did Keren, like an act of aggression, if it happened in the Chatzar Nizik, not in the street, but in the victim's jurisdiction, it goes up, it's upgraded to Nizik Shalim Mishalim. Hachanami here as well, just like by damages you pay 100%. In contrast to the typical 50% that a tam pays, but in a Chatzar Nizik, it gets bumped up, upgraded to 100%. Hachanami here as well when it comes to killing a person. With respect to the Kaifer payment, Kaifer Shalim Mishalim, you go up to 100%. So now we have 3 ways to explain the Mishnah. According to Rav, this fellow was a muad, and therefore there's kaifer. According to Shmuel, there's a tam, chatzi kaifer. According to Ula, a tam, but it's kaifer shalom, chatzar nizik, because it killed the father and the son in the chatzar nizik. Now, so according to Ula, we very well understand why the Mishnah cited this example. Hainu tiktani aviv, the soicha, a father or son, because that's a prerequisite for nizik shalom, because we're speaking that it was in the place of the chatzar nizik, where they belong. Ella Shmuel, but according to Shmuel, who does not reckon with this factor of chatzar nizik, why discuss the father or son as victims? I feel anybody else killed, doesn't matter who. A shar tam pays chatzi kaifer, right? It's just a common example. It's not necessarily a binding example. Okay, if you mechas bereshus bal chatzar chayiv, so once again we go back to that machlekes in the Mishnah. A person enters without permission, he's fully liable. What if he entered with permission? So I have machlekes. Between the chachamim will say, well, if I let you in, I'm taking responsibility. Whereas according to Rav, according to Rebbe, you can come in, but you're still responsible unless I specifically say, look, I be makabel to be shomer your shar. So again, we're speaking about the homeowner's responsibility with respect to watching the visitor's animal. Chacham say it's automatic. Once he gets the green light to come in, it's automatically understood, I'm taking responsibility. According to Rebbe, unless he expresses so, he's not taking responsibility for the visitor's animal. It's Masa we learned regarding the halacha l'maaseh. Rav Amar, we follow the Tana Kamma, which is the Rabban Tana Kamma. It is assumed that the homeowner is accepting responsibility. Ushmuel Amar, Hilchas Rebbe. No, we follow Rebbe, that you have to express it, otherwise you're not committed. So now we have a price. Knois sharcha, the homeowner tells the visitor, bring in your animal. But, ushmare, please look out for him. Keep an eye on him. Okay, you watch your animal. I'm not going to be involved. So what happens now? The visitor is responsible. Hizek chayiv, who's at potter. If the animal causes damage, he has to pay. If the animal was harmed somehow by the homeowner's property, the homeowner is potter. I asked you to look after your animal. Don't blame it on me. So that's the reisha. That's the first case. Next part of the brisa, the opposite. I'll be a nice neighbor. Bring your animal in. I'll watch out. I'll keep an eye. I'll guard your animal. So here, the balabai is fully responsible. Who's a chayiv? He's a potter. If there was any damage to this animal, the homeowner is chayiv. And in fact, if the animal causes damage, the animal owner is potter. I'm taking responsibility. Problem is, Hogel Vakasha. We seem to have an inconsistency within this brisa. First we say, Amr's Knois Sharcha V'Shmarei. The first case, bring him in and watch your animal. Here we say, he's a chayiv, who's a potter. So the visitor is fully responsible for anything. And the homeowner is potter. That's only because he explicitly told him, keep an eye on your animal. Time of the Amalei Shmare. Then we say the Chayiv Bal Ashur, that the animal owner is responsible, Pater Bal Chatzar, and the Chatzar owner is Pater. Because he told him. Right? Hastama Chayiv Bal Chatzar, Pater Bal Ashur. But let's say it was a stama. He didn't express it one way or the other. Come inside. He didn't indicate who's going to be responsible. We assume that the Bal Chatzar is Chayiv. That's like the Rabbanon, right? Green light means I'm taking responsibility. Hastama chayav bala chatzar for anything that the shur does. Upata bala shur. Sorry, chayav bala chatzar for anything that happens to the shur. Upata bala shur, and the shur owner is pata for anything that the shur does because he's in your hands, right? So the bestama mekabel in terusa. The assumption is, even if you didn't express it clearly, that the homeowner is mekabel achrayis. That's like the rabbanon. Good, okay, fine. The problem is, let's move on to the next part of the brayso where it sounds like Rebbe is speaking. Well, you need to express it clearly. We make no assumptions. Bring your animal in, I am going to watch it. You have to say that. Here we say, who's a chayiv, who's a potter. Anything that happens to the animal, I'm responsible. If the animal does anything, you're potter. That's only because I specifically told you, I'm going to watch it. Then we say, yeah, all these things kick in. The balachatzer is chayiv, and the balashar is potter, the mechayiv balashar, but the balachatzer. But let's say he didn't express it clearly. He says, come inside. In this case, we say the animal owner maintains his liability. Chayiv balashar, potter balachatzer. Why? The mistama loy mekabel olein terusa. We don't assume that the homeowner is mekabel achrayis. That's going like Rebbe. That's on the Rebbe. The Amar who says, achi kabel olei balabais in terusa. Unless the balabais specifically accepts responsibilities, potter. Balabais lishma. So we have a steer in the brayso. Reisha, the first part, where it's assumed that the homeowner is mekabel achrayis, that's the rabbanon. We save the next part of the brayso where it's not assumed, this Rebbe. How does that work? Amar Belaza, you're right. Tavra, let's sort of split the brayso. Misha Shamazu, Shamazu, two different authors, two different shittas. Rava Amar Kulu Rabbanon, the entire brayso, beginning to end, is Rabbanon. Liability on account of the homeowner who allowed him to come in is assumed. It's a given. Kulu Rabbanon, I did the Nasa Reisha Shmare. Well, just, the brayso sort of used matching language, since in the Reisha, the brayso specifically mentioned that the homeowner told the visitor to watch his animal. It's the only way that the homeowner is potter, because I told you to watch your animal. So because we used that lashon in the Reisha, so we sort of flipped it and used contrasting language in the Sefer. On the Sefer Vanish Moreno, in the Sefer he said, I'm going to look after it. But he didn't really have to say that, because it's assumed, unless indicated otherwise. So that's Rava's approach. Rav Papa goes the other way. Rav Papa Amar Kula Rebbe. No, the entire brayso, from beginning to end, is Rebbe. Rebbe. The balachatzer, the balabais, is not mekabel achrayis unless he specifically indicates as such. So the question was, why in the Reisha does the balabais have to tell the visitor, watch your animal? It's assumed unless he specifically accepts responsibility, right? So what's the point of that? The answer is like this. So here we're going like Rabbi Tarfon, the Amar who says, Rabbi had this before, Keren, B'chatzar, Nizuk, Nizuk, Shalom, Mishalom. The animal causes harm. He attacks in the Chatzar Nizuk, in the victim's territory. He has to pay full pay. No, 50% discounts. Hilkach, therefore, like this. Saying Shmorei, meaning the homeowner telling the visitor, watch your animal, that changes the equation with respect to this halacha. Hilkach, Amalei Shmorei. If he tells his visitor, come inside, but look after your animal. What he's basically saying is like this. You know what? You can come in, but, at your own risk, and it's not really your. Don't get too comfortable here. He's not like giving him away part of the chatzar. He's not, consigning to him part of the chatzar. So now, if the visitor's animal harms my animal, so it's called keren b'chatzar nizik. The keren b'chatzar nizik mishalom nezek shalom. Since he doesn't really have ownership, even temporary ownership, he doesn't have. So when his animal harms mine, it's called chatzar nizak. It's exclusively my territory, and therefore you have to pay nezek shalom. But lo yamar shmari, without saying that extra word shmari, watch your animal. Rather, he just welcomed him with open arms. Come inside. So basically, what he's saying is, I'm allowing you sort of temporary partial ownership in the chatzar. He's giving him like a kinyan mokim b'chatzar to use the chatzar. Now, sort of, it changes the halachic status of this chatzar. It turns into sort of a partnership now, a jointly owned territory for the time being. And what happens there? So now, if your animal gores mine, it's like it occurred in a chatzar shutfin, a place where we both have ownership. And here it's just like a regular halacha that a tam pays chatzin nezek. Beautiful pshat. Okay. So let's just go back. We had the story with the animal who consumed the visitor's food. Well, if he came in without permission, so we say the visitor, according to Rab, the visitor is potter because, you shouldn't have, the animal should not have overeaten. It's his issue. But if he came up with rishus, the Gemara says basically, in a case where the owner, had to leave because of tznius issues, then the visitor is taking full responsibility for the for his food not presenting, a hazard. We had a chiddush that even a bird that was dug through a shur can carry liability if the owner of the property made it hefker. So basically, he initiated its bur b'shus rabim status. It's a man-made bur, man-made obstacle for which he's chayiv. We discussed the galolim, which are considered hefker. We had the halach of a man entering a chatzar and getting entangled with the homeowner. So for shlei b'rishus, the visitor is chayiv, and the homeowner is pater. And Rav Papa said it's only if it wasn't deliberate, if he didn't know about him. But if he knew about him, he knew about this visitor, he should have been extra careful and not bumped into him. Regarding the water that was spoiled, so if the spoilage happened during the nefila, the shar is chai, but later on he's pater because it's either it's because it's a bar, or Gemara says later because it's a grama. Grama is pater. If during the fall into the bar he killed the person, he has to pay kaifer. How much? Well, it depends. If he's a muad, he pays the kaifer shalom. If he's a tam, typically you pay chatzi kaifer. But there is a case here where we say, according to Rabbi Tarfon, chatzar nizak, you pay kaifer shalom. And we have the brisa with the apparent contradiction, which we resolved several ways. All the best to you, and Hatzlacha Rabbah.